welcome to the office hours. And so we will start. Tristan, you have the first item.
Cool. Yeah, so I have a question about a specific use case that's coming up soon. And I'll just kind of try and explain what the use case is and then my questions afterwards. So the use case is that in this new feature that we're adding called alert management, we're displaying a list of items, and each list has actions on it that can change the state of the item. And in future, we want to be displaying these in a table with filtered tabs at the top. So an example is like an alert could be triggered, like triggering, as in it's currently something's firing an alert. And then someone will move that into acknowledged or resolved. And if you're looking at like the currently triggering alerts, and you move something into resolved, that alert will disappear from that list. And there's sort of like a manual way to do that, I guess, which is to so currently all of this information is in Apollo. So it's being fetched from the GraphQL API. Then we do a GraphQL mutation to change the state. What's currently returned is a single alert with the updated state. So in the update routine in the front end, we could then go and manually play with the state of the list to make sure that this item disappears. But then it's a little bit more complicated than that, because the tabs have a little number showing how many of each state there is. So really we need to fetch the whole list, or query for those totals plus the current page that we're viewing. So it's a lot more complicated than it originally looks to use GraphQL to keep this up to date. So the boring solution is to do the mutation, get the result back. If it's successful, just refresh the whole page from scratch, basically, or actually the whole list, not the whole page. But that's a bit janky, because it's like you click a thing, there's a little delay, then something updates, and then suddenly the whole table disappears and refetches. So yeah, I was wondering, the thought that I had is that in the front end, when you do a mutation, you can define a query. So what exactly you get returned if the mutation is successful, or even if it's unsuccessful, I guess. And I looked at the backend for this, and there's also, maybe I should have linked all of this in my question, but the backend has kind of defined that when this mutation happens, it returns an alert. And then the front end GraphQL query says which fields of the alert that you want. So I guess what I was thinking was is there a way you could define the mutation so that it returns the whole list, or some other query from just a single item? So it's you mutate an item, but then you get a list back. Is that something we're doing already?
My thinking around this, Tristan, is, and it's been a while since I've done front end, but what I remember is that often the front end would maintain a store, which was like a local database almost, of all of the objects that it had downloaded and its state. And so when that object is returned from the mutation, it'll have that same global ID, the same type, but its state will be changed. So, or if you just stuff that into the store, ideally, the front end application realizes that state has changed and redraws. I mean, it depends how your components work. So say, for example, if the table is saying not just present all of the data that I've got, but present all of the data filtered by this state, you actually filter on that property, then when an object in the store changes, because it's been returned from the mutation in a different way, it should just update itself. If needs be, if you need to do really hacky stuff, another way is the object that gets returned, which should be the object that you passed in anyway, like it'll be the same thing, right? You could potentially just like delete it from the store. It's not very nice, but you could say, hey, front end, forget about this object that you previously knew about.
So one bit of background that might be useful to know is that we're using Apollo on the front end, and Apollo kind of manages all of the state for you based on what comes back from GraphQL. So in this case, as long as you query for the right stuff, then it should get automatically updated in the front end. But the tricky part here is, or there's a couple of tricky parts that make it like not really automatic, is that we have this gigantic list, well, potentially gigantic list. It's paginated, and we want to show totals at the top. So that's one query for the whole, like over the whole set of data. And then we also have a page, like the current page of whatever filter you've chosen. So if you change the state of an alert and we're filtering in the front end, then it will update that automatically and everything's fine. But because we only have a limited set in the front end, because of we're already filtering it before it even gets to the UI, then it might disappear from the current page, but the current page is like a cursor plus 20 items. So theoretically, like another item should be coming in to replace it if one gets removed. So that's one complication. And the other one is that the totals at the top also wouldn't automatically update.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I just have to do two queries.
I mean, you can, when you do a collection query, you can say, I just want one result after this particular cursor. I don't know if you could do that in this situation, just to get one more result onto the page.
I think with this one, it's a bit tricky because on the page we're rendering, like as Tristan said, we're rendering there's like a type that renders the counts up the top. So that's the triggered count, active count. I can't remember what they're called. And so that's the type, and then there's also the list type. So what we've talked about in the past is making a type that kind of like encompasses a bunch of these ideas. So like the type could contain the list and the counts. And so I'm wondering if the mutation could accept one of those kind of overarching types, and then inside that you pass an ID for the alert, so that when it could basically do the same mutation of what it's doing now, but then the return type could actually return like everything you need to render that page, as opposed to like doing the individual, load the list and also load the counts. It would kind of just wrap it up in one. I don't know if that would be too overweight though, but it could be something interesting to try maybe.
The challenge that I see with, I mean, like if I'm understanding it correctly, is like not what you said, Sean. It's just generally if you do this mutation and you get back a single object and you're like, okay, this object, I know this object's changed because I just changed it. Great, I'm glad that was successful. Now I need the updated counts. So if you grab the updated counts in another query, would then, like just the counts, would that then mean that it's possible that your list of counts that people are looking at would be out of step with the counts themselves? Does that make sense?
Yeah, if someone else was also touching that list at the same time, you could end up with a race condition.
So I was thinking, if you could just grab the counts, somehow. If I know that in a mutation, you can, I mean, your resolver could return whatever, right? But here be dragons when you start to modify something in this paradigm for a particular use case or a particular thing. So that I feel like what Sean said it sounds like it's like, oh, gosh, that's a lot, but I'm thinking other ways to do it are worse. So maybe it's the least worst. it's possible that you'll just have to do some kind of query afterwards to just get whatever update. I mean, also, don't we have subscriptions? Do we have subscriptions yet? Do we use those?
We don't. We're getting there's a real-time working group who are working on this in real time.
Okay.
So one day, but
Okay.
not in the first pass, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen one page where we poll, but it's not like a true subscription.
Yeah.
But in this case, you wouldn't even need a poll. I mean, because you would know that something's changed, you could kick off the query.
Yeah. I think we're just, if we did it like that, like a 2-step query, like do the mutation, then query again, we just have to make sure we query for everything that's visible on the page, like the current page plus the totals, to make sure there's no data inconsistency.
Yeah, like
but
I think that's really worth trying. Sorry, Tristan. I think it's trying.
I was going to say that is the existing, that's how it's currently implemented. It just isn't as smooth as it could be in terms of like a UI approach. And I don't know much about GraphQL, but I thought like maybe it's as simple as I just have to change the front-end query. But it kind of looks like the back-end resolver would actually need to be changed in order to be able to return a list.
Maybe it's possible. I don't know. Maybe it's possible to return current counts, or at least have a query to say what this now does. But it would still be a database query. It just wouldn't have the back and forthing across. Like it would be an extra database query, but it wouldn't have the bottleneck of the query coming from the client all the way to the server, do the hit, and then come back, because that's way longer. Maybe there's. I mean, I like Sean's idea of like sort of piggybacking them on each other with the type, or maybe some other way. Maybe the resolver we can add, or not the resolver, the type we can add, or the mutation we can add extra fields to say if you want some updated counts, or updated list even. I mean, maybe we could check out doing that, because it doesn't seem like a paradigm that's that uncommon. Hey, I made a change and now I want an updated thing, or maybe this will be rendered not needed once subscriptions are a thing.
I mean, maybe from a front-end perspective, you could have some sense of the counts are visually kind of updating, loading or something. If you do need to do a 2-step, so that they don't kind of happen out of sync, that there's a sense that they're going to refresh and then they pop in or something.
I think if we did that, we'd have to, because we'd have to query like a new page, or re-query the current page. The whole thing would be going into a loading state, which is the current state. But yeah, it feels a bit clunky. But yeah, that's all right. And it's not like the most high traffic part of the application. So like it's definitely not worth spending like a ton of development time to like optimize this. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting question for the office hours.
Thank you so much for that.
And you've definitely given me something to think about.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, me and Sean are both working on this. So we, like, if something does come out of this, like we figure out a way to do it, we can reshare in the office hours sometime.
Cool. My next agenda that I wrote down was, I was just wondering if there's anything we've written that we could potentially push into the Ruby gem itself. The example that made me write this down was that that merge request you assigned me yesterday, Luke, which I think was the copy field description. And so that doesn't feel like something that's like specific to what we're doing. So, and it seems pretty reasonable. And so what that does, if you don't know, Tristan, that copies a description from another field. So if you use it, if there's one used elsewhere, you don't have to make sure you always update if you change what it does. Yeah, so I was just thinking like we're doing a lot of work in writing a lot of our own stuff. So I'm wondering if there's anything like that we could push up to the gem.
I mean, I like that idea. You have it written. Let's write that one on the agenda because that's a good one that we can write down. Luke, you wrote recursion analyzer. I think that was you. That right now the recursion analyzer is really basic, but I think when it's a little bit more sophisticated, then I think that's good. Right now, what the recursion analyzer basically does, it says like, oh, if you repeat yourself. But let's say you actually wanted to dig into epochs or subgroups, and you wanted to say, give me top level group, and then second level group, and then third level group, and then fourth level group. So you're just going like, group, nodes, group, nodes, group, nodes, name, right? Give me the sixth group down or something. That would be tripped by the recursion analyzer as not being a valid query, which of course it is. But so what I want to do is change it so that if it sees that it's traversing the graph in a kind of back and forth way, like going from a parent to parent to child, rather than parent, child, 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 which is fine. But if you're going child back up to the parent and then back down to the child, then that would trip the recursion analyzer. But I raised an issue for it, but I haven't actually done it yet. Anyway, that's like an FYI on how that works. But I'd really like to make it more sophisticated before I ask Robert Masalgo to accept it as part of Canon. As far as pagination goes, I think Brett Walker would probably be the best person to comment on that. Unless anyone else has pagination knowledge.
No, but I've opened them up and I'm like, these look really valuable. I don't know how like general utility they are or specific to GitLab they are, but yeah, it looks like Brett and Jan seem to have done a lot of work on those. So magic to me, I can't understand it fully, but yeah, I was just looking through libGraphQL because I just thought that might be a good kind of general place to scan for potential gems. I think, Sean, this is a really great idea. I remember when we were doing our authorization kind of classes and DSL, because all of that authorize of type and stuff like that, that's kind of GitLab custom. I remember thinking it would be great to kind of wrap that up as a gem, but the implementation is highly, highly, highly coupled to GitLab's declarative policy and all of our various needs. So that's unfortunate. I think it may be too hard to make that too generic. Maybe, sometimes you can take something that's highly coupled and make it more generic and then push it as a gem, but yeah, but I think it's a really good thing to make people aware of, and yeah, to scan to look for these opportunities.
Sweet. Charlie, I think you had the next one.
Okay, so while doing requirements management filtering via GraphQL, we discovered there was a bit of a curly behavior with has next and has previous with cursor-based pagination. But it was like only in this one specific case. So I was like a lot of folks, I didn't really understand pagination. So I asked Brett Walker to help me out with it, which he did, and he was scratching his head with it as well. So he dove into it while I was sleeping, and turned out that he made a fix. So there it is. I see 3 cursors on there, so it looks like people are looking at it. But basically, he was able to. I'm not sure if this is it's not merged yet, but he's been able to do that. So if you see has next and has previous acting a bit weird, it's not you, or at least it probably isn't you. So that's, I just wanted to raise that for folks for awareness. And then someone has written, there's a pajamas issue to clarify the UX direction on pagination. I think that was you, Sean. Great. Okay.
Yeah, there's me. I'll just talk about this quickly. There was a discussion around whether we want to use the old style pagination where there's a next button and then there's also heaps of numbers and you can travel to page 8 of alerts you know, for example, if you're reading alerts. That's not currently supported with GraphQL. They prefer to use the, what's the name for this style of pagination? Cursor-based pagination? Yeah, where there's just a previous button and a next button. There seemed to be a bit of misalignment between the UX team and the engineering team on this. So I think a bunch of times now, you know, they've said we'd like pagination like this, or that's just the way that they always do it. And we've had to say, can we not use it because we'd have to add that to GraphQL. So Amelia from our team made an issue a couple of weeks ago just to kind of, I mean, essentially it would be awesome if there was a kind of approved way of, this is the way we do pagination. And if it means that we have to add it to support the way that they want to do it, that's fine, I think. But yeah, so she made this issue. It doesn't look like there's been any conversation on it yet, but I'll ping her tomorrow and just see if there's any updates, because I think, yeah, if we can be aligned, then that'll kind of iron out some of these questions that keep popping up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Lucas, just before I go into the next thing, Luke is asking what's the weird behavior. We found that has next, it was lying. So if it's, we had pagination that was happening where you clicked on has, like it comes back, and according to it, like say it says has next is true because you're saying first 20 or something, and then you grab the cursor and so you put that cursor into from this one. So you're saying have next from this cursor that you were just at, and then it says has previous false on the next query, which is obviously false because that's where we just came from. So it was a little bit curly. So that was the weird behavior we saw. Does that answer your question? Has next was lying pretty much. So one thing that when I was learning how to do pagination, because I was like, you say, it says, here's your cursor, and then it just gives you a bunch of numbers and letters. And it's like, okay, that's nice. I guess that's a unique thing and it means something to the computer. It turns out that if you base 64.decode 64, that string, it gives you a GraphQL. It gives you a GraphQL, global ID, sorry, and sorting, whatever it's being sorted by, which I thought was really nifty and may make it much easier for people to work with pagination. I think we should add this to the documentation because it feels like it's all well and good being in here, but I feel like we should put that into the docs. So I will raise an ML to do that. But I just thought that, I wouldn't say it blew my mind, but it was like, ooh, nifty. So just want to share it with people. Okay, now I just found another thing that, okay, cheers. Thank you, Tristan. I wanted to, now we're kind of getting to time, but the new query interpreter runtime, there's an issue for that. And so this is just the way that it currently does it is a little bit inefficient. And they've sort of, at the moment with the GraphQL gem, you can do it either way, but the new way is going to become the default soon. And the longer we wait, the more code is going to be written in the old way. So just be aware of that issue. And of course, Brett has an MR. He's like the guy who just upgrades the gem, in the background. And so yeah, he sort of makes sure that stays current, which is very nice of him. So I've put the MR link just there, just so folks know what's going on, and he can explain that in the issue and in the MR far better than I can here. Okay, and then Luke is asking, do you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, so like complexity is something that that you can use to make sure that you're protecting your server, your resources, your web server, and it's not doing too much, and it's just doing the right amount, and it kind of limits the amount that people can query for at a particular time. So you've got all these different kind of ways of limiting queries. We've got maximum depth, I believe. We've got kind of recursion depth. Those can kick in, but beyond that, if there's a particular kind of field that's actually requires quite a lot of work, then that's where complexity can kind of help. So it can kind of limit what people can query for. I'm just kind of wondering in general, is complexity used enough in our schema? Do developers who are adding to our GraphQL schema, do they understand complexity? Do they know what value to apply? Should I do 1 or 2 or 5? When do I do complexity? Have we documented it? Like, do we have a bit of a hole here? Is there an issue that could be, maybe starting with some sort of documentation?
I would say yes, it is something that we're probably missing. I mean, I don't usually look at that when I'm looking at like a merge request, and it's probably something that we should be. I think usually people just say if it's under the maximum that's like assigned to everything, then it's probably okay. Whereas we probably need to, just look at that a bit more. Especially if we want this to kind of eventually be the API, it probably needs a bit more thought put into it. So I think we should start by writing more in the docs, because the link you linked to is quite empty there. I think that would be a good place to start.
Great, thank you for that. I think we're at time now. So thanks everyone for joining us. And I mean, there's one more item, but that's something that we can look at on the agenda. But I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks. But if everyone else, there is GraphQL Europe American office hours at this time minus 12 hours next week. So if you're reading this, please sign up to facilitate, because we will be all asleep. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.